Hi everyone, and welcome back to Mind, Body and Bits. I'm Georgie.
And I'm Jessica.
And today we have Will Middleton. He's a mental resilience coach and a counsellor who is on a great mission to help people's lives get better, I guess.
So he works with people all over the world to help them heal from their pasts, move out of stagnant places and become more resilient, creating better futures for themselves. He's a big believer in pushing people into the discomfort zone to help them grow, something he says he does for himself on a daily basis. So usually we ask a slightly different question to start off with. But what I would like to know, Will, is what do you do, or what have you done this last week for yourself, which has made you uncomfortable?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on here. It's a great first question. I actually went on a silent retreat last week. So yeah, it's my first one.
That's Georgie's nightmare.
Yes, I can't.
Yeah, and that's what everyone says. Their immediate reaction is, oh God, the idea of being silent it was only 3 days, but it's just hell. But it was actually the opposite. It was one of the most incredible experiences.
That'd be beautiful.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. Going into it, it was nerves. You know, it's like, what's this going to be like? How am I going to cope? Who are the other people going to be on this? So,
what if you accidentally speak? What happened?
You know what? There was 1 or 2 times I'd be walking around, and then I'd just break into song, and I'd be like, but it's not that kind of rigid.
I'd be singing Disney around the place.
Yeah. What was the motivation behind that? I love it.
So I've wanted to do one for a while. It's all part of my own self-development journey of, as a coach, a counsellor, someone who works with people where you are having to completely put your own thoughts and life on hold and be fully present with what they're going through. You've got to get really good at, or I feel you do, at quietening your own mind and separating yourself for that hour that you're with them or whatever it might be. And so a silent retreat is a great way to learn to be really present and learn to switch off from the distractions. Now, it is easier because you are already away from distractions of life. Your phone isn't with you and stuff, and it does take a bit of adjustment. But once you get through that kind of initial barrier, or over that little kind of hill of wanting to have your phone or do something to distract you, it's quite a kind of the phrase "beauty in the stillness." I don't know if you've ever, Brianna Wiest's book, and you just become so much more appreciative of what's around you. Everything slows down. And then the purpose is to then use that when you come back into your daily life.
I love that. I think, I love the idea of putting yourself outside your comfort zone and really challenging something that you really think that you couldn't do and then achieving it. It must be such a great feeling.
Yeah. And I really love it, especially because so often I think a lot of people feel discomfort with putting themselves out there in terms of making their voice heard. And actually it's really interesting that sometimes it's the other way around. I think that's really beautiful of actually let's silence that voice, what's actually going on, and tuning into that. I think that's really,
it's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah. I would love to go on one.
I know you would.
But I basically sit in silence anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe we do it together and you can hold me accountable for being quiet.
But if it was just you and Poppy, it'd be fine.
Yeah, Poppy's my dog.
Yeah,
right.
Let's go back to the title resilience coach. Now, we do a lot of resilience in our jobs in terms of with our clients and stuff, but I feel like it's almost like a term that means something slightly different to everyone. So I wanted to know what your definition of resilience is.
For me, I think resilience is about dealing with hardships and things in life in the best way possible that works for you, based on putting yourself in situations where you are going to get knocked down. And it's not about not getting knocked down. It's not because that's, we can't, you don't go through life without being knocked to the ground a few times. It's about how long do you stay down and how do you respond to whatever the situation you're dealing with. Because resilience, as you said, it's different for everyone, but there's no scale for it in terms of, anything easier than this doesn't count as resilience. It's how are you, based on whether it's something like a conversation you have with someone bumping into you on the train, and the way you respond to that, and that ability to not let the kind of side of your mind, which I always call the egoic mind, take over and think, right, let's react, let's get emotional, let's get angry and lose control of yourself. It's about, okay, this is a situation that's in front of me. Let's think about this. How can I best respond to it to allow myself to move forward in kind of the most beneficial way? And And that is, as I said, it's something that I think we all learn in different ways. But I've always had a big belief that in order to become resilient, you do have to be put in situations of discomfort, because that's where the growth is. That's where you learn about yourself. When things are stripped away, you don't have the comforts of your daily life or whatever it might be. The things we're really used to falling back on is more about, well, actually this thing has thrown me a bit and my emotions are a bit all over the place and my mental physical state is a bit, is being thrown about. How am I going to respond?
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is fall down 7, stand up 8. And I think that summarizes what resilience is.
It's interesting because what tends to come to mind for me is if I look at, say, like, you know, in the room, like, Georgie, you've built so much resilience through like your health. And then I always think like I feel quite resilient based on like moving through like an abusive relationship. And I sometimes feel like those are quite big things. And I feel like people might be like, oh, you can only be resilient if you've gone through something quite big. So from your perspective, why might people seek out smaller discomforts in life? Because no one is going to go and seek to go through something traumatic. So what can they learn from the small things?
Yeah. So as you said, in both your experiences, something that's happened to you, which was kind of out of your control, or at least it was done to you. So you didn't have the choice. Whereas I call it kind of applied suffering, where we choose to put ourselves in a situation where we can be, where our resilience can be tested. So in terms of those smaller things, when life maybe is going all right and things are pretty okay, what are the little things I can do on a day-to-day basis that are kind of putting me in that zone of discomfort? And that is things like striking up that conversation with that stranger because you're interested in what book they're reading, even though you're like, oh, I'm they don't want to speak to me. It is the, you know, maybe I'm going to turn the shower cold at the end of it because even though I don't want to, I'm going to just override that voice that says, no, stay comfortable. So those are the little things.
Yeah.
Now, of course, no matter how many times you put yourself in those kind of situations, when something traumatic or really quite heavy hits you in life, you're never going to be fully prepared. There's always going to be things that throw you more than you're going to be able to prepare for. But the difference it will make in your ability to think, okay, even though I haven't been here before, I feel pretty confident in myself that I can get through this. It's going to be hard. It's going to take time. I'm going to be knocked down. I'm going to stay down for a while and I'm going to let the emotions pour out, but I'm not going to let it keep me down. And I'm going to use what knowledge I have and the ability I have with the connection and the knowledge I have of my own emotions and what I know works for me. And I'm going to start that climb.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to cry.
I find that really but that is the thing is, because I suppose when you say that, everyone even at home will be thinking their own personal story or something they've been through about something is happening, something is going on. They probably do have a voice, which is like, I don't know how I can get through this. And actually, I suppose what it is that little voice, which is like, and it gets stronger every time. Every time you test it, I'm like, I can do this. I can get through this. I'm just flexing that muscle almost.
I also think trauma is relative to the person. So if you were to look at
little T trauma, big T trauma.
Exactly. And I have, this is going to, I don't mean this to sound mean in any way, but I have friends or family who are going through things and it's not woe is me this, but in relation to things that have happened in my life, it's like, well, what are you moaning about?
Yeah.
Almost. But I've got to catch myself. Everyone's trauma or everyone's suffering is relative to them.
Yeah.
And they could be, in a very dark place from something that isn't relatable to someone else. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. And I think the analogy I like to think of is that everyone has a box that they fill with their pain that they've gone through in life. And it's not about the size of the box, it's about that box will get filled to the max.
Yeah, love that.
And so just because your box is a different size to someone else's or a different shape is kind of irrelevant. However, back to your point, I do agree that there is, I think, a little bit of a kind of problem at the moment in I was going to say in our generation, but where people are sometimes falling back on things that are throwing them, that actually maybe they're making they're making out like it's actually worse than it is.
Preach.
And it's sort of,
Are you calling us the snowflake generation?
Not us.
No, not us. But it's that
no,
thing
I
of
totally agree.
yeah, because you're right. Like, although it's never about comparison, there is an element of, and this is what I try to tell myself. It's like if I'm going through something that's quite tough, there is sometimes benefit in thinking, well, wait a minute, step back for a minute. Like,
Yes.
how bad is this? Like, if I really think about it, have I been here before? Have I gotten through it before? Okay, let's go. And even if not, it's still a case of it, because it could always be worse. And I think you need to be able to sort of step back and think, okay, there's nothing wrong with spending a little bit of time to sort of think, okay, woe is me. Well, this is really upsetting. But there's got to be a point when you snap out of it and you're just like,
Absolutely.
right, we're gonna get back on this, because then what you don't want to do is fall into the victimhood side of things, and then you're like, I'm such a victim to this really hard thing. It's so bad, and you hear about it, and they're like, what's wrong? And it's like, oh, you're thinking of like a younger person. Oh, I didn't get that job, and it's been like 6 months, and it's just like, well, you've only got yourself to. It's your responsibility. You've got to kind of take action.
Couldn't agree more, and I think that I'm not, you guys are experts in how the mind works, right? And how people run and work in different ways. I'm not. And so it really gets to me when it shouldn't do, when people in my life are, they don't necessarily have the ability to get themselves back up. And I almost want to shake them and just be like, you can't do this. Like, get yourself back up again.
One of the really helpful things that I heard once, and I literally can remember the first time I heard it and I was like, oh my gosh, is that it's not your fault what happened to you, what the circumstance is, but it is your responsibility to make a change, to do something with the future.
Yeah, really like that.
And that's the thing that I always think is like, when you're like, oh, my life's so miserable, I can't get that job or whatever. It's like, that's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to be like, the future can look brighter. I can do something about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's the line though? This is a loaded question for you both. Where's the line with mental illness and someone who is, let's say, a little lazy? I don't use that word lightly. Do you know what I mean? And isn't really helping themselves, the type of person who I mean, to move forward and to be a bit more positive, and is quite stuck in that negative mind frame. Where's the line? What's the difference in your opinion?
You're right. I mean, it's a hard one to kind of see through, because there are lots of people out there who aren't diagnosed with something, but probably very well are going through things like depression or anxiety, or whatever it is. And there's people who are claiming they are when they haven't actually been, it's a self-diagnosis thing you hear about. And so sometimes it's important to look at the background. It's like, okay, so what's actually happened to you? Is this something, is what you're explaining and what you've gone through sort of valid for you to be saying, and this is why I feel the way I do? So I think in terms of, you'll always find that the people who get really offended by people who say, look, it is your responsibility to kind of get out of this place and you need to kind of start putting the work in. The ones who get really upset by that, particularly when you see on social media in their comments and whatever it is, are normally the ones who know deep down that they are playing victim.
Yes,
and
because they're in the victim mindset.
Yeah, because you have two people who will see the exact same type of, post, whatever it is about, okay, time to, it's your responsibility to put yourself in a better place. One person plays the victim, one person plays the card of, actually, yeah, that's true, I do. And I'm going to, from tomorrow or from now, I'm not going to be in this, I'm not going to let my life be this way, and I'm going to start doing the little things day by day that are going to help me. I'm going to go and get help. I'm going to show that vulnerable side of myself and admit that I'm not okay. Awareness, that's the first step. I'm not denying it, and then the rest will follow.
It is hard though, just for anyone out there who is in that state of like, oh, I can't get myself back up. It's a hard process 100%. Every single time, no matter what you've been through, I think. Let's go back to your why. I said that too many times. Why? Jessica, help me. Why you got into this. I know that you previously worked in a corporate job. So what was the purpose of the transition?
So, I did your very stereotypical post-uni grad scheme into the corporate world for about 3.5 years, and quite quickly decided it wasn't really going to be for me. Mixture of being in an office. I didn't really like having someone order me around. I didn't really like working on Microsoft PowerPoint every day. So those kind of things, I thought, well, look, I'm not going to do this forever, but I can't leave until I have a plan. Now, at the same time in my life, while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do after, my younger brother was creating, he was a very, very talented artist, and he was at college, and he created this incredible piece of work where he partnered fashion with mental health to basically like encourage people to wear their hearts on their sleeves through the clothes we wear, and profits would go to a mental health charity. And he submitted it for his last piece of work at school, and it was, got him a distinction, secured his place at university, and it was a really, really impressive piece of work. And I remember saying to him, you've got to make this a real thing. You've got to turn this into a fashion brand. People would love to wear this kind of thing. And sadly, it was something that that never came to life through his means, because sadly he lost his life back in 2019. And so after about that first year of me and my family kind of going through that grief, I turned around to them and I said, I think we need to make this a reality. There's got to be some sort of legacy here, because he put so much effort into this, and this spoke so much volume about the experience he had, this whole thing of mental health and not having to cover it up or hide it under the sleeve, but actually wear it on your chest. And so I decided to start bringing what he'd already created to life. And having never been in the fashion world before, I was a bit clueless and got so much wrong, but I learned so much as well about running a business, and flew out to Portugal to find out where my manufacturer and the clothes were going to be made, and spoke to the charity I was going to be donating to, and did everything in between. Bear in mind, he did a lot of the backbone of the work, and then made it a real thing in 2021 and launched it, and it's still going today. And that was kind of my step into, particularly as much in the fashion world, but more into the mental health world, because through that, I then found myself gravitating towards wanting to help people more and more. I'd be at markets, fairs, trade shows, whatever. And when I told them that story, because it was all about being vulnerable, they would then share to me some of their most personal stories. And we'd literally met 5 minutes ago. And I just thought, I want to train myself to be able to work with people in this space and help people, because there is a lot of struggle out there. But I also believe there's a lot of potential in people to heal, and I want to work with people as much as possible. So then that led me into the coaching and the counselling world.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I can't imagine how tough that is, but congratulations for keeping the legacy alive, I would say. And I always love the saying, wear your heart on your sleeve. And actually, I've been criticized for it before, which I really hate. Jessica will tell you I'll cry at everything. Like, as soon as I have emotions, I'll just cry, or you can tell how I'm feeling straight away by my face. And I know that it is a weakness sometimes in business, but I now have learned to love that about my character, and probably won't change it. So I love that saying, and I love the messaging behind what you're sharing and what your brother wanted to share as well. So in that sense, that's your why, which is so strong, right? In terms of when you go into coaching clients now, you bring that strain of strength with you and what you've been through to help others. Do you work with others that are going through grief? Is that your specialty? Or
interesting enough, it's not my specialty at the moment. I mean, even with grief counselling, you go through a certain training to become a grief counsellor. Might be something I do in the future. So I don't actually work with people who are going through grief at the moment. It is quite broad though, in terms of, because the reason why I decided to train as both a coach and a counsellor is because I thought it gave a really good end-to-end perspective of it. Because normally most people are either counsellors or they're coaches. Counselling is very much the kind of past healing things you've gone through, get you to an okay place in the present. Coaching tends to be a little bit more like, okay, life's not great right now. I'm not depressed. I'm not necessarily like mentally ill, but I want to be in a better place. Okay, what are we going to do going forward?
Yeah.
So I want to give that end-to-end kind of lens. And so a lot of my clients I work with from start to finish.
Yeah.
So we're not just getting them to okay, I'm healed. We're also getting to now let's level up.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've said this about counselling. I've had many in my life, and I value every single one of them. They've got me through various times. But one thing is, you kind of get to a point with a counsellor, in my opinion, you guys might disagree, where you've done the sort of past healing, you've done the childhood exploring, you've done the changing your neuro pathways, you've done the CBT work, and I last year needed to seek some help from a counsellor again. I haven't had one for 5-6 years now, and felt that I'd already done that with multiple counsellors before, in terms of, and I've heard this from some friends as well, I've already done the groundwork. So now help me move forward. So I love that you're doing from 0 to 100.
I think as well is that it's, for example, as a coach, I only do the forward thinking bit I guess, the sort of the rebuild, as I always like to call it. But the thing that I find really special is exactly that is I had a very similar experience to you. And it's like you get told like, okay, we feel like you're fine now, like, bye, off you go into the world.
Yeah.
Without a plan, without a structure. And so actually
Future
I think
thinking.
what you're doing is so important, because otherwise someone will have to like go and find someone new, or actually I think being able to take them through that whole journey is really special.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you say, it can be hard sometimes to have to retell your sort of whole story again to someone new. Are they going to be right for me? This is why I think something like social media does have a benefit, because if I can put myself out there and people can follow me and get an understanding of who I am, the tone I deliver, the approach I take, by the time they come to work with me, they normally know that they want to work with me. And I hear a lot of them come to me saying, I've been through 3 or 4 different counselors, coaches, whatever. And it can be quite tiring. So it's kind of like, without meaning to trivialize it, it's a bit like a dating thing where it's like you're almost trying to find the right match for you. And so I'm a big believer in, you know, there's got to be more out there in our industry. I know coaching already is quite big there, but particularly in the counselling industry, where more people are putting themselves out there beyond just a paragraph and a picture on a website.
Yeah. And also, I feel like counselling, not for people like us who've used them, and I honestly got me through everything, but like I feel like there's a bit of stigma around counselling still with our generation in particular. And in particular, men, you correct me if I'm wrong, and they're more likely to go to a business coach or a mentor or a life coach than they are to a counsellor. I don't know what is the stigma, do you think, behind that? Is it because it's kind of old school?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, I think, about the stigma. Even in my training, I was sometimes the only male on the course. And so
that's not right, is it?
Yeah, so it's still a female dominated industry. Now, obviously, if you go with whys, it's, you know, okay, naturally women have a more of an empathetic, compassionate side to them. They've got more emotion, they're more in touch with them. So they therefore going to be better counsellors? So, but I think, yes, there is that, because of the stigma that then carries over to the customer side, which is, I don't want to admit as a man that I'm seeing a counsellor, because immediately people think, well, what's wrong with you?
Yeah,
and
that's
I think,
what it is. Yeah.
And the thing is that the irony is that guys won't go see the counsellor because a lot of them will say, well, it's fine because I can just, if I want to talk to someone, I'll talk to my mates. But then they don't talk to their mates about it, because a lot of guys, when they meet up, they just, you know, if anything, they just want to switch off and chat about sports and whatever. So again, I'm generalizing, but so yeah, you're right. I think there is still a gap. And I think it's getting better. More men are being vulnerable, which is great. And maybe more men are coming in from the sort of actual counsellor side as well. But yeah, I think even with me, like more of my clients are female.
Yeah.
If we talk about a little bit what you said there, I thought it was really important. As you say, it's like, if there's something wrong, I'll talk to my mates about it. Or I think lots of the time people presume that a man would talk to, if he has a partner, about it. How do you feel like that potential lack of vulnerability affects people's romantic relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge, isn't it? Again, if we go down the sort of route of the way a woman and a man come into a relationship together, the woman's coming with her way of dealing with things is to talk, is to confront it then and there, to get out the emotions, and then she's fine. And the man is to sort of, you know, go into his cave, deal with it for however long he needs to, and then he comes back and he's fine. So the two can kind of oppose each other quite a lot. And
can I just caveat this with saying we did a podcast on this, and can we call them masculine and female energies? Because I resonate strongly with the male perspective, where I'm like, don't talk to me.
Sorry,
Jessica and I,
that's fair enough. Yep.
Jessica and I always, like, when we're talking about in the past dating or relationships, we have opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right.
Georgie is very typical woman. I'm very typical man.
Okay. No, I'm glad you corrected me on that, because it's right. You're right. Masculine energy, female energy, because it can come from either side.
But it is true. Like, more women they act on emotion, and I think men act on logic. I want to fix, or like you said, they sort of like retract. That's the word. Thank you. And then they're like, okay, let's be really logical about this and fix it. When actually they just need to listen.
Rubber band.
Yes.
That's the wave.
Yeah.
And so I think, back to your example, the logic versus emotion, and it's someone will come there saying, oh, you know, I've had a really tough day at work, my boss shouted at me, I don't think I want to work there anymore. Person responds with, well, have you thought about quitting? Well, that's not well, have you thought about asking if you can work in a different team? Well, it's not that and it's like immediately the male energy is like fix.
Yeah.
And the female energy is talk, emotions.
Yeah.
And so I always try and say, if you're playing the role of the male, if you take on more of the male energy, rather than going straight for solutions, just ask, tell me a little bit more. Like, how did that make you feel? Oh, that must have been really tough to hear that. Oh, what was, when he shouted at you, did you get any support? And you kind of just let them kind of, a bit like you would in a counselling session. Just,
yeah.
And you know what? At the very least, just sit and listen. You don't even have to ask questions. You can just sit and listen and stay in silence, which a lot of us find.
But your partner is also male energy.
He loves a good talk.
Oh, yeah, but not like overly emotional.
No, but also I think, and this again comes from not putting words in his mouth, but he comes from a background where vulnerability is not the norm, from his background. And so he has worked so hard to be able to almost put lots of templates in place to be like, this is what I want to talk about and how I talk about it. And I think it's taken a lot of effort to do that. And I think it's something, he went and often did that all on his own and he didn't see a counsellor or anything. But I think for a lot of men, they probably are wondering, maybe I would like to be a bit more vulnerable with my partner, or maybe I would like to even just bring a little bit more vulnerability in my leadership style at work. Where can they start? Because I feel like there's not that many tools available to them, because there is still this stigma of like, men shouldn't be that.
I also think there's a blurred, sorry, before you answer, there's a blurred line on what vulnerability is. When you say be more vulnerable to a man, again, I'm stereotyping, men with masculine energy will instantly be like, I don't want to do that. That's not very masculine. I don't want to be vulnerable. I'm very stereotyping, generalizing, because they think it's, you correct me, they think that it's showing a lot of emotion, when I don't think that is what vulnerability is.
Yeah. So just to briefly go back to your point, Jessica,
Sorry,
I'm glad you
interjected.
said, no, it's fine. I'm glad you did say though that your partner has had to like put the effort in to make it work, because it really frustrates you when people say like, well, I want it to be fixed, but like it's not working. It's like, well, how long have you been trying? Like, you've actually got to put the work in on yourself, self-development. Same with a relationship. You are putting two people together. It takes work. Relationships take work from the day you meet to the day you're no longer together. And so, it's, and by that I mean, if you stay together the whole of your lives until you die, not saying you split. And so you've got to put that work in. Like, it's not going to come overnight, and it is going to take time, but it's going to be so worth it for what comes as a result of it. And back to your point, Georgie, around, what is vulnerability? Because as you're right, if you tell a man just to be vulnerable and show all his emotions at once, I think a lot of men, what I sometimes see is that sometimes if they've done that, it hasn't come back in their favor. So they've done it, and then it's resulted in, someone taking advantage of it, or they lost a relationship because of it, or, or they're seen as weak, or all these other things that come with it. And then they think, so I don't want to be vulnerable anymore because it didn't work that time. So I guess from a male perspective, the way I look at vulnerability is, first and foremost, it's a vulnerability with yourself. It's not about anyone else. It's about, am I okay with me? Like, how well do I know me? And that is an incredibly hard question to answer, because it has to go so deep and you can't answer it overnight. It's kind of like, well, in order to allow myself to be vulnerable, I've got to know, what are my insecurities? What are my fears? What are the things that are holding me back from being my authentic self? And I think until you get to that point where you can start accepting the way you are and being okay with the flaws that you come with, but also knowing your strengths and things that you bring that you're really proud of, I think it then becomes very hard to fully accept someone else. And so normally you'll find that the more you accept yourself and your vulnerabilities, the more you'll be able to accept someone else's. And so when two people come together in a relationship, for example, you come from a place of, well, when they share something that is a flaw or a vulnerability or an insecurity or whatever, rather than retracting from it or not knowing how to deal with it or shutting it down or whatever, it's a case of, tell me more, let me help you with this. Let's grow, we're kind of growing together. It's a dance, isn't it? It's a relationship, all relationships are dances, and they're sort of like, you've got to move with each other. And at times it won't flow, but it's about being able to strip it all back and sort of say, okay, well, where was there something that I probably got a bit wrong, or I could have learned from that? And how am I going to work on that for next time?
Yeah.
It's rather than being reactive with each other, it's processing how, I guess, the other one wants to express their vulnerability or emotions, and then working together to understand each other's styles, I guess. Is that what you'd call it? Styles, Jessica?
And one of the things I think is so good that you mentioned there is, lots of the time people think that vulnerability is just showing like, I feel insecure about this, or something went wrong. But actually, I think something that's never talked about really is that for a lot of people, it's so vulnerable to share dreams, ambitions, goals, because whether it's like, I don't know if I quite believe in myself. So when they share that and someone, if they get an adverse reaction of like, oh, you could never achieve that, then that's also really crushing when they've been really vulnerable. And so I think you mentioning actually it's about knowing your strengths, sharing your strengths, acknowledging them in other people. That's also hugely vulnerable. And I think so often we focus too much on vulnerability being this bad thing or negative thing. Whereas actually I think it can show so much vulnerability when you share like, I trust you enough to share like my biggest, craziest, wildest dream, which is so exciting, but I'm not quite sure they're ready yet and it's scary. I find that so vulnerable and I think it's so important you mentioned it.
Yeah. And yeah, it's a really good point. It's the vulnerability on the good stuff. Well, I say good stuff as in the stuff like the ambition, the goals. Because you're right. If you say to a mate, I've got a goal to do this, and they kind of turn around and laugh at you and they're like, you're never going to be able to do that. Yeah. Immediately you think, well, it kind of pushes you further back and it says, well, I'm not going to share that then because clearly I'm met with a little bit of resistance there or whatever it might mean. But again, that's about, this then comes around to sort of who are you around that should be, picking you up and building you up and allowing you to reach your full potential. And, you'll never meet someone who's doing better than you, that is jealous of you, that tries to put you down. It's always the people under you or who are jealous or whatever it is, who are going to be the ones who come in with criticism because it comes from a place of envy. And they're like, oh, I wish I could be saying that about myself. And I think human beings, that we all have so much potential in us. Everyone does. It's about accessing it, it's harnessing it. And whether that takes you 6 months or 6 years or 60 years, it's a case of, it is in there. That self-belief though. And sometimes you just need one other person to be able to turn around and say, I believe in you too. And in my role, sometimes that's me. If the client I'm working with, it's like, look, we're in this together. I believe you can, and I need you to believe you can. And from there, anything's possible.
Through this journey of yours and learning what you've learned and now put into practice in your career now, have you filtered the people in your life a lot more due to what you've just said about people should lift you up?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've been pretty fortunate in my life where I've had good friends throughout, but I've definitely changed a lot of my friendships over the past few years because I've wanted to surround myself with people who really inspire me, who are kind of on the same trajectory where I am, around people that are doing better than me in many ways, and I don't have any envy or jealousy. It comes from a place of, that's incredible. Like, I love that is amazing. That makes me want to feel like I want to do more and I can be better, because if you can, why can't I? So that's the kind of, those are the kind of people that I'm surrounding myself with. And I think, again, that's a personal opinion. There's nothing wrong with people who don't want to be around that. Sometimes people just want to be around people who can just kind of make them feel quite safe and just, they just want to take it easy and they kind of know what's, they've got their life set out for them and they're good with that. That's great. But for me, I feel like particularly as a younger person, I've got so much energy and enthusiasm to kind of really get some, really build it, both everything from a work perspective, personal life, physical challenges, whatever. So I want to be surrounded by people that are going to kind of drive that as well.
Absolutely. Like challenge you, lift you up, spur you on.
Yeah.
Love that.
I think as well, if we're going to make this sort of practical, so say, for example, someone says something vulnerable or they're trying to put something out of their comfort zone. That's, I suppose, where we increase in resilience. For people who are maybe trying that, want to flex those muscles, what's some guidance or support that you would give to them to kind of encourage them a bit?
So my program is no, I'm joking.
Well, later.
No, so yeah, because you're right, and I know you kind of asked this earlier about what is out there to help people start that journey sometimes on their own, and I think it's a case of you've got to find out what works for you, and by that I mean based on when you start, maybe following certain people on social media, listening to certain podcasts, reading certain books. You've got to do a bit of the groundwork to find out, okay, that's not for me. That's not the kind of person I want to emulate. If you're looking up, you can have mentors that you've never met before. Like I would argue that there are mentors I've followed who for years who have been inspiring for me, who are just people I follow on social media.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
And that's okay. And you can have that. And it's like, I really want to, I love how he talks or she talks about that or how they act in that way. And so you're going to have to go through a lot of stuff that doesn't work. You try something for a number of weeks, months, whatever. Oh, that didn't work. That wasn't for me. It is a bit of trial and error. but there is so much out there to access. And so, but coming back to sort of day to day and what you can do for yourself, I think in terms of actually building resilience, as I touched on earlier, it is those little things about like, well, who do I want to be? Where am I trying to get to? It is a case of I want to be more confident, or I want to quit a job and start my own business in this, or I want to start a relationship, but I don't have much confidence about dating. It's like, okay, well, let's start as small as possible. Like, let's go back to step one, which if we use the example of, let's say, dating, what is it that's holding you back from asking someone out, whatever? It's like, well, I don't have the confidence to even strike up a conversation. Why would they want to go out with me? Okay, well, we've got to go back again. What is it about you? What are your insecurities about what's, that's not allowing you to feel confident in your own skin? And you've got to start kind of, there are going to be times when you've got to put yourself in again in that discomfort zone where it's like, you know what? I'm just gonna, the next time I grab a coffee or the next time I'm on a train or whatever, I'm just gonna have a conversation with someone. I'm just gonna see how it makes me feel to put myself in a situation that makes me feel like a bit nervous about my confidence. Let's see what happens. Chances are you're gonna get a great response.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a nice conversation with someone. Okay, that made me feel quite good. I quite like that feeling. Okay, next time, let's do it again. And then you're kind of having to craft your own route through about like how you're going to then build on whatever it is that you're trying to get better with. If it's the job thing, am I going to quit a job? Don't think about what's coming. Think about like the step-by-step thing of like, what do I need to do? I need to confront my boss about it. I need to ask, is this, this isn't right for me? What is the business I'm trying to build? And how is that going to look? And it's not going to happen overnight, but you've got to have a bit of a 1, 2, 5, 10-year plan.
Yeah.
And I think that's what
baby steps.
Yeah.
People want instant kind of like gratification, things that happen overnight. And it's like, it doesn't exist. It's the, don't become a success overnight. It's the sort of, there is so much work that needs to go on in the background. And so once you get on that road, on that path, it's not going to be easy. There are, you're going to stumble a lot. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just, you've got to find your way through the route, through the jungle. And it's, you've got to sort of figure out for you, but no one can tell you where, what it should look like. You've got to use what's right for you to kind of forward.
I think that's true in every like element of wellness, like fitness for one, nutrition. It's not about like, well, it's what we preach about all the time. It's not about quick fixes or radical changes. Any change takes time and it's not a linear process. Forward, backward. And it's the learnings that you take from that, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the things that came to mind off the back of what you said, what do you feel like the relationship is between rejection and resilience? Because something that came to mind as you were talking there around dating and stuff was, there is this TED talk, I can't remember who it's by, but it's this guy, it's called this like 100 Days of Rejection. And he goes every single day and he tries to get rejected. Not necessarily in a dating sense, but that's what made me think about it. What do you feel like the relationship is between the two of those? Yeah,
so I think... I've seen that TED talk as well. And I think rejection is such a kind of scary thing. And if you look at if you then look at, the science behind it, particularly with men, the idea of rejection is such a big thing because if you go way back to tribal times when being rejected was an idea of being outcast, and then it led to death because you couldn't reproduce. And, that there is something inherently, particularly in men, that really fear it. Not saying that women don't, but it's, that's why you do have a lot of men who get really scared about the idea of asking someone out. And so I think in terms of, again, it comes back to, you've got to be able to look rejection in the eye. You've got to be able to face rejection and not take it personally. I think that's what we do is we think that if someone rejects us, although it is on paper personal because it's about us, it's not to do with us.
Yes.
Because how can someone who barely knows you, whether you've been on 1 date, 2 dates or whatever, or even a text and you've been aired or whatever, how can they know you well enough to have a full complete picture about why they're rejecting you?
Don't look at me like that.
It's obviously it's to do with them. It's everything in life is to do with our own perspective. If I reject someone, I'm not rejecting them because of who they are. I'm rejecting the version of someone that I want them to be, which is nothing to do with them. It's all to do with my own experience.
Yeah. I think that is such a powerful message. I think particularly, I say this to clients all the time when they're the beginning stages of dating. They also don't know you to reject you. Like, unless you are, well, even in people are like, oh, we've been really vulnerable. And I was like, you've shown someone what you wanted to show them. So, it's just that kind of, particularly at the beginning of a relationship, beginning of dating. I'm like, I don't think you've got to that stage where they're rejecting you.
No, it's not about
you
in dating, is it? The more that you can, like you guys said, ingrain in yourself that it's not personal, but it is when you're in that I'm not talking, by the way, I'm not talking recently, I'm talking what happened last year. That when you're the dating thing, when you hardly know someone, you can get over it very quickly, right? When it happens on a deeper level, it's really hard not to take it personally.
Of course.
So how would you suggest building that resilience?
So again, I always think if you take something personally, it's because there is a wound that that you haven't kind of healed properly. So I think, because again, if you started dating someone, you think it's going really well, you think they really like you, and then suddenly turn around and they're like, I'm not interested anymore. And you take that really personally, and it really upsets you, and you think, what did I do? I did everything right. I took them to lovely places. I took them out, all this stuff, and they still didn't like me enough. Then the only kind of response that I can give is that if you get really offended by that and you get really upset by that rejection, then there is something in you that's saying you weren't good enough for them. Because if you knew you were good enough, it just wasn't the right person, you would treat it more as, okay, that's upsetting, and it was a shame because it was going really well. But it's kind of like that's not for me, clearly, because I'm a big believer, without trying to get all sort of spiritual about it, that when we put the effort into certain things will fall into place the way they're meant to.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when we end up with the person we're meant to, it's, if you've put the right work in and you've kind of, at least, as I say, going way back to our conversation on acceptance of yourself, then that person will come. And so in terms of, I'm not saying don't take it personally by means of like, don't care. Like, obviously, yes, it's important to care. And yeah, get knocked down, be a bit like, oh, that's actually such a shame. Like, I thought that was going really well, but just be able to sort of think, okay, but it's nothing on me. It doesn't make me less of a person. It's not because I've got problems or I need to fix myself. It's just about, it clearly wasn't right for them.
Yeah.
Let's move on, let's move on and see, and if there is something maybe to fix, maybe there is something you thought, okay, maybe I didn't do that very well, or maybe I was a little bit strong on this, or maybe I can work a bit harder at making more of an effort in the date where we actually go and stuff, then, be willing to be vulnerable and be sort of say, I got that wrong.
Take accountability, yeah.
Take accountability,
and
exactly.
but I'm a big believer now in that I think it's really healthy to experience that in your life.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's really healthy. Like, it changes you as a person.
100%.
And
It's
it also
so hard
makes
to
you
say
not,
that,
take any BS. Sorry to say it like that, but I think it teaches you what you're looking for, how to find it, and it gives you resilience.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really healthy lesson for everyone. Huh?
Sliding doors.
Yeah, I think it's really, I take it as a massive positive.
100%. Yeah. I think it's, it's that, again, if we link rejection to failure, the master has failed 10,000 times more than the students ever tried. And it's like, and obviously people don't see all the background stuff when people are failing, rejection. And then they land that person, or they land that job, or they land that investment, or whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, but do you know how much I had to go through? How many hurdles I had to crawl over and stuff like that. And I think that's the exciting part. That's the sort of like the bit you could be proud of, because you're like, you know what, the person I was and the person I am now and where I've come from, that's been such a journey for me.
Yeah.
Like,
amazing.
if it was all just smooth sailing and like nothing, it was just easy as, then you'd be a bit like, am I deserving of this? I don't know. And so, and again, no one gets out of life alive in terms of metaphorically and literally, but
wonderful.
in terms of you're going to get knocked down. You do not get through life. Sorry, better phrasing. No one gets through life unscathed. And it's if anything, would you not rather kind of go through some of those rejections and failures earlier on to put you in better stead for the next time it comes along? Yeah. So that, as you said, you're not taking BS from people.
Oh yeah, and I also think that my mentality now is that if you've been through something like that's traumatized you, or like whatever anyone's been through in their life once, if it were to happen again, you'll deal with it so much better. You'll know what to do. So it's almost I don't want to call it a ticking box exercise. That's really not what I'm trying to say.
A resilience toolkit.
It's you're building your toolkit, aren't you? And so when life throws undoubtedly challenges that are similar to that again, or feel the same in terms of the setback that it gives you, you'll know exactly how to deal with it. And I think that's such a positive and such a strength.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we could just keep on talking. I feel like it's such a huge topic.
We need to do like round 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
But sadly, we cannot. We have a tradition on this podcast that we ask everyone the same final questions.
Okay.
Which is sort of like a sum up of how you are, what's been going on. So firstly, what has I forgot.
Cool. That's a great question.
What's the best thing that's happened to you in the last week? What's the worst thing that's happened to you in the last week? And what have you learned from it?
Okay. So actually, I'll start. The worst thing was I'm training for this running event that I'm doing next week, and I was meant to go on a really long run on Saturday, and my Achilles went halfway through.
No.
It's really bummed me out. It's not going to stop me doing the event.
No,
I'm still
no.
going to do the event,
Is
but
it sensible to still do the event?
yes, resilience. And you know what I said to my mum? I told her about it. She was like, "That's just stupid. You're not even being resilient. You're just being an idiot." And I was like, "No."
I tend to take the same attitude as you. Like, I'm still
When I
gonna
say
do
it
anyway.
went, like it's not damaged. It's just I could feel it a little bit, and so I'm not going to run anymore, which is annoying. But it is the way it is. It'll be fine.
Can you line bike alongside everyone?
You can't line bike through mountains, no.
Oh right, okay, fine.
Yeah, so it's
Oh wow.
Sorry, no, it's not like a sort of in like a park. It's way down in the south coast. Anyway, so that's
Fun.
the worst thing. The best thing, I've already spoken about the silent retreat. That probably would be the answer, if I'm allowed to repeat that.
Yeah,
just because it was such an incredible experience. I think once a year, calm your mind down for a few days a year. I don't think it's a lot to ask of anyone, and honestly, the way you come out of it is quite transformational. Even just from 3 or 4 days, you know, we rest our physical bodies in many ways. We should be able to rest our minds as well for longer than a sort of couple of hours at a time. So that for me was, you know, made me come out a lot more appreciative, grateful for so many things, and kind of that inner peace.
My way of doing that is surfing. Switches
Love it.
everything off.
I love that.
And I sing to myself, so I couldn't be silent.
That's fun. Then.
I'm in the water
You do
singing
you.
Moana.
But I think it's something I always think. Something when I find something tricky. So, for example, like learning to ski, I was like, "This is a disaster for me." Is like bombing down a mountain. Like I can't stop. I don't have to
Skiing
stop.
also does it.
I
yeah.
sing.
Yeah,
'Cause it's
we all
just
do.
it's
I'm
just
in
a
the water.
great like
On my own, singing genuinely Moana. Or the
pushing yourself. I love it.
I love it. I love it. Surfing's my it's turn. Everyone's different. Everyone's got a different tool, right? Whether it's a retreat or it's meditation. For me, surfing.
Yeah, find out what works for you.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, thank you so much for coming onto our podcast. Sorry, it's been a long one. Well, I'm not sorry for the listeners. I think that was packed full of value.
Yeah.
We will link everything of Will's down below: Instagram, website, clothing brand. What else? Are you an author as well?
No, not yet.
Not
Okay,
yet.
not yet. Incoming. When he's an author, we'll link it. So please do go check out. I love what you post on your Instagram. I think it's brilliant. Go and check out the clothing brand, and also if you're interested in working with him, we'll leave all the program details in the show notes. So go and check it out. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you next week. See you then. Bye.